everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Integrating Activism, the broadcast. My name is Nikia Delaware, and I am the Chief Creative Officer of Tokeativity, which is the global feminist community for active cannabis culture. If you would like to learn more about us, please visit our website at tokeativity.com. We are extremely happy for you to be here with us today for this broadcast. It came about as a way to remind our community that activism has many levels and facets, and that each one of them fucking matters. Whether you're protesting in the streets or simply acknowledging the fact that you live on stolen land. We here at Tokeativity headquarters, we live in Portland, Oregon, which resides on Multnomah, Wasco, Cathlamet, Cowlitz, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other territories. We curated a bunch of clips from thought-leading women within our community that have spoken at previous events over the last 2 years of mostly digital events that we've done because of the pandemic. And these clips are compelling and they inspired us, and we hope that it does the same for you. If you take an interest to any of these clips that you see today, you can see them in their entirety on our YouTube channel. Just search Tokeativity when you go to youtube.com. I want to give a big thank you to our brand and media partners for their continued support of Tokeativity. Thrice, Sensi Magazine, Kind Leaf Pendleton, Oregon Cannabis Association, Natural High Company, The Mob Nation, which is short for Mom-Owned Business Nation, and Cannabis Wedding Expo. Thank you so much for your continued support. And stay tuned afterwards, because we're going to have a live interactive session that's going to be led by Lori Lord, the founder of Natural High Company. And also, if you get a little, tired of watching something, be sure to poke around within the event. We've got a photo booth, and then we've also got a confessional where you can talk about, how you became an activist. What is the thing that made you an activist? And many other prompts if you'd like to confess something to us. Stay tuned for the show. It's going to start here pretty soon.
We envision a world in which the cannabis, psychedelic, and intersectional feminist movements heal our communities and our earth.
We envision a world in which women and Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and people of color own at least half of the world's most thriving and sustainable businesses.
We envision a world in which people are free to make choices around their consumption.
We envision a world in which plant medicine consuming mothers and parents don't have fear of losing their children.
We envision a world in which there is a thriving, supportive community for all cannabis-loving women to know one another.
We believe in the normalization of plant medicine and the celebration of consumption culture.
We believe all people are capable of radical self-healing.
We believe that the power of the people comes in the form of advocacy, civic engagement, representation, and inclusion.
We believe that each individual has autonomy and intuitive wisdom around what is best for them, and that should be respected.
We believe in creativity, curiosity, joy, and wonder for this beautiful existence we are experiencing together.
And we commit to ongoing anti-racism work for ourselves and our community.
We commit to centering women and welcoming all who celebrate the feminine.
We commit to the safety of women and Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and people of color over privileged people's comfort.
We commit to always learning, listening, and evolving in honesty, truth, and integrity through personal and professional growth.
We commit to making space for difficult conversations grounded in self-awareness, being accountable for our behaviors, understanding impact over intent, and taking appropriate action in accordance with our code of conduct.
The Tokeativity Manifesto. These statements ground us in our purpose and in our mission, and we're so inspired by each and every one of you out there in the world who is living with these same principles in your heart as well.
This was an event that I really wanted to participate in because it made sense. Every single day I'm proud. Why? Because of Black pride, right? Because of bisexual pride, because of she, her pride, because of disabled pride, because of natural hair pride, because of cannabis patient pride, and because of Brooklyn pride. In truth, it's all about self pride, right? And I've spent really all of my adult life fighting for what I consider to be parity, and really making sure that every single space that I'm in has room for all of this self-pride. And not just my self-pride, your self-pride, her self-pride, his self-pride, their self-pride, and truthfully, all of our self-pride, right? That has been something that is tied to my thread of, just who I am as a person. And I wanted to make sure that I was sharing with you guys some of the work that I've been doing since entering the cannabis space. But honestly, all of that has been my career since becoming, I think, a grown woman and a businesswoman, doing things that I feel like are meaningful in the work in order to create that space for our self-pride, whether it was creating a plus size market, really turning around the industry and the business for Target and creating a brand and ensuring that there was self-pride and body pride, or being a multicultural strategist for Target as they tackle hair and beauty and making it prideful to have natural hair and to be able to demand shelving and space and the like. And again, natural hair pride. And then becoming the weed head and recognizing that I need this industry to work well to live as a cannabis patient, and having the utmost pride in how that gets done and the work that I get to do every day. I came out of the closet as the weed head 5 years ago, and now fast forward to today, I am a cannabis regulator, an educator, and I've been working on amazing things with Dr. Rachel Knox and the Cannabis Health Equity Movement.
Body positivity for me is about feeling like Beyonce in every group, not just when you are with your comrades or your slim women or your thick women or your full figure women, and not just women, also, for men and people that identify as otherwise, we all have to be able to love one another and celebrate everybody. So that's where I stand. I really want the opportunity to say it as loud as I can. Plus is equal, and body positivity is for everybody. And I think that when you are representing something on a platform as large as social media, and being able to be an influencer, people try to couple you off into things, and I just want to stand firm on that. So, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to tap in on the side. I know that our time is limited here, but I want to be able to give an honest and authentic perspective on what I feel body positivity is, And it's not just loving yourself when you're all dolled up, It's those days when you feel terrible. And that's just honest, There are some days when you may look at yourself and you don't see the beauty that other people may see in you. And so we have to continue to encourage ourselves while we encourage other people to understand that none of us are perfect. And we all have to love the flaws that are not really flaws. They're not. What they are is the differences that make us unique, that make us beautiful, and I just am a crazy zany person. So body positivity is this, of course, right? But body positivity is also this, right? It's also this. It's not just when you're glammed up. It's not just that. It's also this. If I can get it out, I'll tell you. Right? When you're just you. This is body positivity as well. And I'm not going to wipe my lip gloss off because that's a lot of mess right now. But it's all about loving the skin that you're in and being able to love yourself through the process of perfecting yourself. And the beauty starts from within. It really does. So I encourage you guys to get out of the group, go into the world, be strong, be positive. And we have to all give ourselves the permission to love our own bodies and also to celebrate the bodies of other people that don't look like you.
I mean, since I'm teaching one on how to be yourself, I'll just be myself here. And like, I completely believe that we live in a thought-based reality and that like we're co-creating what is happening in our worlds. And so if we're not sitting back and really believing like, I deserve to live the life that I want. I deserve to make these changes. I deserve it. I can do it. If someone else can do it, I can do it. And I think that I think it's incredibly powerful for us to have that. Your authenticity and like knowing who you are and shining that out is something that no one else can have. Your authenticity is your superpower.
Well, my first advice to anyone, regardless of what the question is be yourself. I think it's the hardest thing to do as someone who is still, expressing my gender differently than I was 3 days ago. It's like, I think working on yourself is the best thing you can do. And when you're working on yourself, it's not only about educating, from the past so that you don't make the same mistakes, but it's also like educating yourself on how to really love yourself. I feel like if you don't love yourself, it's hard to go anywhere. And I know that's what RuPaul always says, and it seems cheesy, but I really do believe the root of everything is loving yourself.
So empowerment. So I was soaking this morning, and I was really thinking about empowerment and what that means to me. And a song came to mind, actually, an oldie but a goodie. Many of you have listened to Anita Franco in the past, I'm hopeful. And so the song that came up, or the lyric that came up for me was, sometimes I sing like my life is at stake because you're only as loud as the noises you make, right? And that to me really embodies empowerment, right? Because when we use our voice and we speak out about anything, it could be speaking about what you like or speaking about what doesn't work for you or whatever. Anytime you use your voice, you're really empowering yourself and you're empowering others because you're showing them that it's okay to do so. And so often women are put in a box or not able to speak their mind or speak their voice, right? Like when we had the vice presidential debate and Kamala Harris said, my favorite line of all time, I'm speaking, Mr. Vice President, right? I'm just saying, like, how many times have we all been in a situation where we get talked over or interrupted, and again, it's about using our voices. So that to me was kind of where I was going on the empowerment thing. And my dogs are really using their voices.
For us, total equity is health equity. And these are the pillars as we see them. Now, of course, economic equity, we actually see this right away. It's something that we discuss when we're talking about cannabis opportunity, licensing. What does the equity designation look like for people to be able to transition into the space? But as a whole, it's really just about impartial assurance of access to economic resources, such as income and savings and assets and capital. But the key part is that personal and collective collective agency over the flow of those resources through your household and your communities. And we know from cannabis criminalizations that many households and many communities have been basically denied this opportunity to have that collective and personal agency over the flow. And so that is why economic equity is so important. But it is really only one leg of this table here, a foundation of total equity, environmental equity being a second important pillar. It's impartial assurance of access to and maintenance of clean air, water, land, and soil. And immediately, of course, I think of things and places like Flint, Michigan, where, you know, there was a struggle still with clean water. So we know that there are communities that are dealing with that inequity right now. Across the country, globally, that is a challenge. And so that is something that not only can cannabis revenue help resolve for with reinvestment back into these communities, but cannabis itself can remediate the soil and be used as a tool. Additionally, we see human equity as a really important component of health equity and total equity. Optimization of an individual's knowledge, skills, ability, capability, adaptability, and empathy is basically creating a whole human being. And now that I have a son that's almost 18, I realize that it starts from beginning, day one, from conception all the way to adulthood. And what does that look like when we are educating our communities and our children? And we can see already that there are many communities that have had inequities over the years, and they still do, and that can be resolved with community reinvestment. But then there's also this important part of optimization of an individual's physical, mental, and spiritual fitness. And the physical fitness is what we think of when we think of health equity at a very superficial level. It means equity in healthcare. But beyond that, this is just one part of one pillar in a much larger thing that we get to drive well-being. And that to me is super important. And it's not just physical, it's mental and spiritual fitness. Cannabis, as you know, can be used as a tool for all three. But the most important equity pillar, which is why we talk about it so much, is social equity. And I think one of the most devastating things as a person who has Black pride, bisexual pride, again, disabled pride, all of the prides I have, is that in this country, we keep failing at equity or social equity because we haven't necessarily seen it yet. And so we have to keep pushing for it. But that's a fairness in policy, regulation, and the distribution of social resources and services to ensure that we get all of the infrastructure it can provide. And we also get impartial and continual access to all three of these other pillars. And so that's why we focus so much on it, and why it's something that we have to continue to fight for when we think about regulations and the law. But while social equity is absolutely the vehicle, this total equity and health equity is our destination. And so that's the reframing we need to do. And cannabis is just a demonstration. The truth of the matter is this is actually ubiquitous in everything that we should be doing in our country for sure, but globally as well. I'll just end here and say that cannabis is an integral solution for achieving health equity for all. We are looking to demonstrate it as part of the cannabis health equity movement. And there are ways that everyone can get involved. You're here, you need to continue to educate yourself, learn the history, learn the science, do the work, and then pay it forward, advocate, educate, share the truth, dismantle the stigma. I do that by saying I'm a cannabis patient every day, all day, and participate, whether you're ancillary side or see the solution. And last but not least, demonstrate. Build your coalition, whether it's the Tokeativity team and community or beyond.
So that kind of brings me to my next point about activism, because I think when people say, oh, when I say to people, oh, you should be civically engaged and you should, be an advocate and an activist, I think people often think that means like, oh, that means I have to start working for a campaign, or oh, that means I need to, be, lobbying at the Capitol, or I have to work for a nonprofit. That's not true. All of those things are amazingly important. All of them are, but activism, especially grassroots activism, runs the whole spectrum, and it all matters because it's this big wheel forward that we're trying to push. It's this big wheel we're trying to push forward, right? We're trying to push the wheel forward for sound federal legalization. We're trying to push the wheel forward for reducing the stigma, eliminating the stigma around cannabis use. We're trying to push the wheel forward, especially like on this event, for, cannabis consuming mothers and how like maybe weed is the new wine and you guys shouldn't be so judgy about it. Whatever it is, it all requires activism. And there's so much work to be done, especially in the area of cannabis use and drug law reform in general, which is intertwined with all the other, social injustices that we need to work on in this country for sure, is all intertwined. And I really believe that moms have the collective power to be one of the most pivotal voices in this movement in terms of changing things.
Word empower as a brand name actually has a few different meanings. One, first of all, people who are in pain, like my mom, who I originally started the company for because she deals with so much pain in her life. For her, I want to empower those who are in pain and help them live like a better quality life, right? Secondly, I come from an activist and advocacy background. And I used to volunteer quite a bit and travel to Washington, D.C. before it was in vogue to go lobby back in the early 2000s. And what I actually did back in the day is in 2004, I was sitting in a jail in Washington, D.C. with 13 other activists at the time. And because we had sat down in front of Health and Human Services. Long story, no big deal. We were there for 6 hours and let out. Not like today's activists who mad respect for. Anyway, it was still that kind of it was still scary a little bit, right? And what I realized at the time was that women were not really a part of the legalization movement, at least to the degree that they are now. We had about a 30% approval rating back then from women versus a 50% from men. So I realized that we really needed to do more outreach towards women, with women, and that's where Empower got its roots. So Empower is actually an acronym that stands for End Marijuana Prohibition, Organize Women, Enact Reform. So it's a plan of action. And shortly thereafter, I learned that I would be able to make better progress in changing hearts and minds if I created products that actually worked, that didn't get them high, and would allow them to understand that cannabis actually has therapeutic benefits.
My real reason for being here is for advocacy. I want to represent women of color and show that we do need to reactivate this medicine. We do need to use psychedelics and plant medicines of all kinds, you know what I'm saying? And talk a little bit about that and how we can start to own the medicine women inside of us and start to heal our families, because we are responsible. The women, we are responsible for using these plant medicines and getting ourselves reacclimated to the work that we need to do, because it doesn't just work for our white brothers and sisters, it works for us too. And the more that we start to really address these topics, and like I said, those of us who have had an opportunity to use these medicines and get the healing, and I feel like it's up to us to stand in the space and be the gatekeepers to allow our brothers and sisters, especially our Black community, to come in the door, because we have so much PTSD as just a world. And so I'm not an advocate for pharmaceuticals, but I did work in the field. I'm a licensed microbiologist. I worked in the hospital setting for 10 years. So I saw it. I saw it come and go, as far as like people coming in, wanting help, needing help, and, you know, just pills, prescriptions being written, you know, left and right. But when it came down to our traditional medicines, you know, the things that, you know, the food that we eat, from growing our own foods to, you know, using more fruits and vegetables, because I feel like that's plant medicine too. And I feel like fast food, all these things is kind of like pharmaceuticals. And it takes us away from ourselves. So, you know, being able to stand in the space, to have the conversations, to allow somebody to come and ask you questions. That's why I'm here.
So there are five main reasons that Black folks, I think, don't use psychedelics more. And one is that we don't know about them, because typically they've been seen as, you know, the white guy drug, the drugs that tech guys do, and tech bros and hippies. And That's just the media feeding us, trash again. Because the truth is that mushrooms and these medicines are in our bones. They're in our DNA. They're from where we come from. They're from, they're our history. This is our medicine. It's for us as well. It comes from us. So just know that, this is for you.
The Psychedelic Defense Fund is a broader umbrella under which sits the Psychedelic Justice League. You may ask yourself, what are we talking about in this case when we talk about psychedelic justice? Because there are so many components to justice and what justice means in any plant medicine and in any realm. But when I think about the Psychedelic Justice League, the purpose is to right now work on efforts to help people who are currently going through the system or who may be facing impending criminal penalties. As we know, decriminalization does not equal legalization. And so what we hope to do is gather a collective of pro bono attorneys who are willing to work in every state. We want to find people who are certified in every state because for me, I can't help anybody in Oregon or California. If you're in the district, I can help you. But that's why it's important that we have a collective of attorneys across the country who are willing to help people when they encounter criminal penalties because of their use of therapeutic psychedelics, of sacramental use of psychedelics, or really just doing their own thing, because there really is a civil liberty component when it comes to our right to do what's best for our bodies. I believe earth medicine is what's best for our bodies. You don't have to agree with me. The fact is we shouldn't be penalizing people, particularly criminally, because we believe differently than them.
So I really believe that we all, not we as in the four of us, but we all as in all mothers that use cannabis, play a role in normalizing cannabis use. And because moms are held to this extra standard within society, I am just preaching this far and wide that when we normalize cannabis use for moms, when we get to a point that it is fully acceptable for any kind of mom to openly say that they use cannabis without judgment, once we get to that point, that's when cannabis use is really normalized for all of society. So the sooner we work to normalize cannabis for moms, the further we're pushing cannabis for all of society.
Hi, everybody. I am G. Williams. I am the founder of Remedy and also Black British Autistic. And today, if you don't remember anything I say, remember that you are sexy and that you are blessed. Okay? Just remember those things first. And this is all to do with my journey and remembering those words, sexy and blessed. I want to thank Tokeativity for inviting me here today. It is 11:17 here in the UK, and I'm G. Williams, and I'm so happy to be here because my journey started very, very, very tragically because I used to be blind, and a lot of people don't know this, especially when you hear me speaking like on Clubhouse and around on Instagram doing lives. A lot of people don't know I used to be blind. I was blind for 5 years. And with that, it used to be something like, what does that feel like being blind for 5 years? Totally alone, darkness, and then I regained my sight. How did I regain my sight? I had a condition called keratoconus, and now I live with 2 corneal transplants, so I can now see again. Okay, so forward on to that. I then became pregnant, and I had my son. Pregnancy was sort of okay. I have PCOS. I'm also the UK's #1 PCOS advocate as well. And I caught preeclampsia, and catching preeclampsia was just not great. So one day I went in for my scan with my son and my son's father at the time, and they looked at me and they said, "Oh, gee, Miss Williams, you're going to have have the baby today." I was like, "What?" I was like, but I was there and I was like, "It's okay. I'm sexy and I'm blessed. This is going to be okay." Had my son, everything was fine. 3 weeks later, we're still in hospital. My son caught a condition called necrotizing enterocolitis, which was a gut flesh-eating bug. My son is 2 of 17 children that stayed here alive. So imagine 15 children died. My son is 2 of the children that survived. I fought for my son. I'm still fighting for my son. And as we have this conversation, I'm going to tell you why. My son's name is Rume King, hence why the brand's called Rumedy. I am a herbalist, master herbalist, nutritionist, and I also study the hemp and cannabis plant. And I was thinking to myself, what do I call my brand? And it was Rume. It's my son, Remedy, Rumedy. Now, along this journey, last year, my mum passed away. She didn't pass away from COVID. She passed away from a stroke. She couldn't get the medical attention that she needed. And unfortunately, she had a triple stroke. This journey was hard because while I was in hospital for my son for 2 years, so imagine I was blind for 5 years, and then for 2 years I had to live in hospital with my son. During that time, total career change, went into nutrition, went into herbalism, and then became a canna mama. So the journey has been hard, but at the same time, it has helped me learn things while I was there for my son. But I was still sexy and blessed. So every day we used to wake up and they used to give me bad news. And they said my son wouldn't be able to walk, talk, and possibly eat. He has only 7 centimeters of his small intestine, and my son is on life support every night, including now, and he's in his bedroom with his nanny. She's also a nurse. So, a lot of people say, how do you do all this? And why do you do all this? It's because for my son. So last year, I said to myself, I have to bring this brand out, because I then found out that my son was autistic. And being released from hospital after 2 years, which was an amazing day, I knew my son was autistic. And I said to myself, okay, I started to study autism, what could help. Then I started to learn about the endocannabinoid system and also homeostasis. Now, I'm a ganja baby because my dad's a Rastafarian. So I've been having ganja smoke being blown in my face from since I was born and since I was released from my mother. It's nothing new to me. So being a canna mama is something that's truly and dear to my heart. And I said to myself, right, studying nutrition, I have to help my son on this journey. I'm not going to allow medical professionals to dictate how I should feed my son and what I should be doing. So I started to formulating all the products that you see that is available on my website. Then I started to get into CBD. And it was like, there were so many on the market, but I had to know which one was the best for my son, because I'm not going to give anything to my son that I wouldn't take myself. I had family in Ireland, partnered with my family in Ireland. We have a hemp farm in Ireland, and we are producing some of the best CBD oil available on the market now. Now, how did I get into Black British Autistic? Because I don't want to keep you all here because you're all sexy and blessed. And it was a 2-year battle. My son, it was time for him to go to school. I said, look, after 3 weeks of taking CBD, my son's meltdowns went. 3 weeks, he went. 2 months later, he started eating. This time, in the process, he was walking. Everything they said that my son couldn't do, my son does now. And he also talks, he signs, and he uses Makaton. It's just been an amazing journey. And for me, I said to myself, you know what? Starting Rumedy, especially after my mum died, pushed me even further to launch the brand. Now, I launched the brand on the 27th of January, and it has been a roller coaster with how many families have just contacted us, because in the UK, we are the first UK superfood brand focused at kids with autism, gut brain health problems, and also malnutrition. Now, this is filtered on to Black British Autistic because, as I said earlier, it was time for my son to go to school. My son had a really rough journey in the process and they failed him. So I took my local authority to court. I am the first parent in 15 years to fight for my child and be sent to the upper higher court in the UK and win. My son is going to be attending school in September. I have been fighting his journey for 3 years now. He's going to be 6 next month. So when you're a Canna mama and you have this family around you of such powerful women, and you're here today listening to everything that everyone's going to say, remember, being a mum is the best thing that could ever happen to you. Whether you're human mum, dog mum, cat mum, you're going to fight for yours. And that is what I did. With the brand itself, Rumedy, so many people, there was so much stigma around CBD in the UK. And all it is about education, learning, listening. And that is what I've been advocating and also doing. So I always say this, do not be afraid to start again. Do not be afraid to just learn about something new. If you're afraid and you judge it, that's something that says, this is not for you. So I want to say to everyone in the room today, taking CBD oil has helped me significantly because on the journey of finding out that my son was autistic, I then found out I was autistic. My partner is autistic. So I am a family of autistic people. So my partner's autistic, husband, my son's autistic, and I'm autistic. And we found this out after nearly 40 years and having my son.
Let's talk about how now you can talk with your kids about cannabis. Because my goal in this life is to really work toward a future of ethical consumption. And as Canna moms, we are the ones that are going to have to do that. And it starts at home and it starts with our children.
As you can see, we come from so many different backgrounds, right? And I would say it's slow in the fact that, skin color does play a part in this. Deshita already mentioned, but prior to this, she didn't want to come out as a Canna mom right away. And part of that hesitation, I'm going to assume, Deshita, is because you're a woman of color. And women of color are perceived differently when we're cannabis consumers, right? There's still a lot of women of color who are being attacked by child welfare, for cannabis consumption, even if they're not putting their children at risk, right? When we look at the movement for Canna moms and how it's shifted, there's definitely high acceptance in terms of social. And this is probably a little bit controversial, but there's more of a high acceptance for Canna moms who look like Danielle and Bianca, right? Versus moms that look like Deshita or myself. I probably do a little bit better than Deshita, but moms who are brown and Black colored, they get a little more of the negative perception when they are a Canna mom and are out there. I'm excited because it's shifting, right? There's a lot of shift towards acceptance for Canna moms, but there's still a lot of work to be done in acceptance of Canna moms that are of color.
That's the other thing I want to talk about too, is that we see a lot of medical providers drug testing mothers at a lot of visits throughout the pregnancy. And what I really want to start having a conversation encouraging mothers to say is, why are you drug testing me? If I've told you that I'm not consuming any drugs, why do you need to drug test me? And I really would push that you have that conversation in the very beginning and refuse that. I want you guys also to feel really empowered that you do not have to take on any medical procedure if you do not want to, period. You always have the right to refuse medical service, period. So if you don't want them to test your urine, you can tell them no. They may tell you that they don't want to service you anymore. But again, this is why I really strongly encourage and recommend that you have that conversation at the beginning. Another thing that I want to also say is that if you are in a position where you don't have the ability to sort of pick and choose your medical team, you're kind of like due to insurance or geographical locations or what have you, limited in your choices. Again, it's really important that you understand their policy and procedure. If their policy is to report every mother to CPS, then you need to, these are personal choices that you and your partner or your family or whoever are going to have to navigate. I can share with you my own personal experience and my information, but at the end of the day, these are very personal choices that you'll have to make. And the reality is that at the end of the day, regardless of what state you're in, regardless of whether they have recreation or medical, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug. And when it comes to pregnancy and labor and motherhood, we are vulnerable because the Schedule I drug can be considered neglect and endangerment. And so as long as you can provide solid evidence and information that your cannabis choice and use is not neglecting or endangering your child, you should be able to navigate through child protective services. One of the things too that I would also recommend is if you're birthing at a hospital or like a birthing center, anywhere other than a home birth, call them before you, are in labor. Call them around, like week 20, somewhere in there, and ask them again too, hey, and if you want, you could be anonymous, get someone else to call, or just, use like Jane Smith or whatever, and just tell them that you're there gathering information and you really are curious to know what is it that, or what, not what is it, but what is their policy and what is the procedure for a positive THC screen. And a lot of the hospitals don't really have one. And some of them do. And it really just, it depends on where you are geographically. But again, I really empower people to have an open, honest dialogue. It is a little bit tricky because of the legality of things, but I do believe that there are providers out there who understand, who support, who are willing to trust and learn and walk with you.
And this is kind of where our journey began. I was turned into children's services for breastfeeding my baby with a bong in my hand at HempFest. And it began a year full of a lot of stress, fighting 4 counts of neglect and fighting to keep my children because I wouldn't let them into my home, the agency into my home. They tried to take custody of my 2 girls, and it was the fight of our lives just to keep my 2 little girls. During that time, my oldest daughter, Michaela, who's pictured by the HempFest stage, just a mix of genetics, environment, the stress from all of what we were enduring, having to fight children's services and everything. She got sick and she developed acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is cancer of the immune system, bone marrow, and hers had spread into her brain. She was diagnosed on July 13th of 2012. And as I had mentioned earlier, I was working on the black market and I was working with cancer patients, and a little boy named Cash Hyde had his story on the Oregon Normal website. And I had found out that kids could use cannabis. And 3 months later, my daughter had cancer. So I knew I wanted to use cannabis medicine for her because it just, I'd watched it work wonders on adults. This is Michaela at diagnosis time. In the middle there is a picture of her x-ray. That is a basketball-sized tumor that was putting so much pressure on her heart and her intestines that she had to go into the pediatric intensive care unit. They were not sure that she was going to make it. She endured a surgery with no anesthetic while awake because the tumor could have crushed her heart had they put her under. The immense amount of struggle this little girl had, like, I get tears in my eyes talking about it. She's just such a hero to me. That smile on her face, it just down there on the bottom left-hand corner, that was the smile that cannabis provided to her despite having to be bombarded with toxic chemotherapy. Michaela used up to anywhere from 1 to 3 grams a day. We started off with a little pin drop size of cannabis oil, and we worked our way up. She had to endure chemotherapy for 2.5 years and was on it for about 6 months after, and then has since used it as a teenager for secondary effects. But over here on the right-hand side of my screen, you can see a picture that has percentages and dates on it. Those percentages are actually the percentage of leukemia in her blood. And so on July 15th, it was 51%, and they had been administering chemotherapy for 2 days at this point. She was supposed to go into remission very quickly with chemotherapy, and unfortunately, she just wasn't responding. As you see on the percentages of leukemia in her bloodstream, it would go down. Even on the 19th, we hit about 3% leukemia cells, and then back up on the 20th, we were at 29% leukemia in her blood, despite very aggressive chemotherapy treatments. So the doctors came to me one day and said, hey, it's not really working. We are going to be needing to look into a bone marrow transplant, which would be full body radiation, brain radiation for the chemotherapy or for the cancer that was in her brain. And also, we just don't know if this is going to work. We don't know if we can find somebody to donate bone marrow. And I was terrified. So we got out of the hospital. I got her a medical marijuana card under the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, and I gave her her first dose. And within 10 days, she was in complete remission, and her oncologist used the words baffled because her cancer cured from the bone marrow first and then the bloodstream, which they had just not, that's not how it works with chemotherapy. So her oncologist said that he was completely baffled.